Good evening, and welcome to Making a Home for Father Kapaun, the journal launch event for our fall 2021 edition. Uh, Thank you for being here tonight for a discussion about Father Kapaun, his life, his legacy, his story, and the implications that it might have for us as Kansans and for people in Wichita and Pilsen and Marion County specifically. I'm Chris Green. I'm the managing editor of the Journal, magazine published by the Kansas Leadership Center. For those of you who are not familiar with the Kansas Leadership Center is located in Wichita, and it's an organization that offers civic leadership training. The Catholic Diocese of Wichita is one of our 87 partners that we're currently working with through our program called Leadership Transformation Grants. The Journal is a magazine that we publish to spotlight important civic leadership issues and to encourage thoughtful discussion about leadership challenges. We are currently have this print edition on the press. We're also online at klcjournal.com, but our print edition is a couple days behind schedule and will be released hopefully by Thursday in the mail going out. It's our biggest edition of the year, 96 pages, lots of color. All the photos that you saw in the slideshow at the beginning of this discussion are included in that magazine. And this was a really special story for our correspondents and for us. And we're delighted to be able to bring it to you and have this discussion tonight. We're also grateful to KMUW NPR for Wichita for serving as the media sponsor for tonight's event. Tonight, we want to celebrate the release of the Journal's fall edition and take this opportunity to raise awareness of Father Kapaun's story and legacy and explore what it means for civic leadership and for Kansas. And I think also there'll be an opportunity for us, for our panelists, for our guest here, to reflect on the connections between leadership and faith and service and country. I wanted, one of the things that we ask when you register is why you're here. And I didn't want to single out any one person's answer, but I did want to sort of summarize it in the chat, like what people wanted to talk about. And just generally speaking, there are probably about 4 categories of people that registered for this event. People who are just, really, captivated by Father Capon and honoring his story and his legacy and have been really impacted and are interested in thinking about, well, how do we share that with the world? Some of you are curious about Wichita as Father Kapaun's resting place and what that means for the diocese and the downtown Wichita and preparing for crowds and having a working parish. Others of you are interested in Marion County and what's being planned there to encourage and promote the county's role in honoring his legacy. And a final category is the impact on Pilsen. And people are curious about, well, what the current situation means for Pilsen and kind of what the future might look like there. And I will be introducing our panelists here in a second and giving each of them an opportunity to kind of share some introductory comments about what they'd like to talk about. But I wanted to briefly touch on my Father Kapaun story as maybe a way of setting the tone or something significant. So all the way back in 2001, I was a young, rookie reporter working for the Hutchinson News, and I got assigned to cover the dedication of the statue in Pilsen for the Hutchinson News. And so it's a little more than an hour away. It's a long trip and, on a Sunday, and I get there and just as I'm getting out of my car, getting all my stuff to rush in and shutting the door to my car, I realize that my keys are inside the car and the door slams and my keys are locked inside the car. And I am just getting here, trying to get oriented, trying to start my assignment, trying to, cover this event. And I'm not the person who's been in the longest tenure. And this gentleman, sees me, sees what happened. And he's like, don't worry, I got you. You go in and do your job. I'll call the locksmith and I'll wait for you to get back, or I'll come find you, and I'll get your keys. And so I just it was the strangest thing. I just went off to do my job, and I came back after doing the reporting and found the guy, and he had my keys, and he was like, okay, that's great. So I paid the locksmith, so now I just need you to pay me back. And I don't remember what an emergency locksmith cost back at that time, but it probably wasn't cheap. And I didn't have any cash, and I don't believe that there are a lot of ATMs in Pilsen at the time, or maybe now. And so this poor guy, I could see the look in his eyes, like, I am never going to see this person again. And I like say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. So I take down his address, and I say, I'm going to send this like right when I get home. And so I go back, I write my story, I write the check, I write a thank you note, and I send it to this guy who I can't remember his name. He might even be on this call tonight, and I wouldn't even know it. But it's just like, it's a small and inconsequential story. It's certainly not a miracle or anything on the level of what we'll be talking about tonight. But I love how just something surrounding Father Kapaun's life brought out the best in people, and sort of brought out a sense of service, a sense of trust and faith. And in our society, with as polarized as we are now, to see that reflected in a story is cool. And another interesting tidbit is that I kind of got in trouble for going out and doing the story, because something else happened in Hutchinson, a fire, and I wasn't there to cover it. And I believe the publisher said, oh, it was a mistake to go to Pilsen. And I think now, 20 years later, we can say that it wasn't a mistake to go to Pilsen, that it was all set up for this moment, for things to sort of come full circle. So that's my Father Kapaun's story, as small and as inconsequential as it is, but it was meaningful to me enough to share it with you tonight. So one thing about the journal is that whenever we talk about something with the journal, there's always a leadership challenge involved. There's always something that's needs to be worked on, and we can be hopeful and optimistic. But we're not writing about something just to talk about the good things. We're writing to talk about maybe the things that need to be addressed or talked about or discussed further. And I think that's the case tonight, when we're talking about all these opportunities that this story creates, as well as challenges for Marion County, for Pilsen, for the Catholic Diocese, for downtown Wichita, that there's significance to these changes that are going to require careful and thoughtful leadership over the next 10, 20, 30, 50, maybe longer period. Grateful panel. We have hear more from him later as he leads the interviews. Also joining us tonight is Ray Capon, the nephew of Father Kapaun. And Ray, I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about what's on your mind tonight, and what do you hope we get to dig into a little bit deeper?
It's still for me and my wife and our whole family, it's still kind of a numbness that all went on. I mean, the greatness that all happened and how it happened. For me, it's just been seeing how Father has affected so many people, and how all this has happened in the last 6-7 months, how many people have been affected by him, how many more people know his story and know his name. It just astounds me. I mean, every day I'm getting contacted by someone who just happened to hear his story and happened to read about it. So, Father is reaching out to the thousands, and it's so much beyond what we ever envisioned and what we ever entailed. And that's what I love seeing, that all this happened. Father's mission just continues on and continues forward and just continues to grow in leaps and bounds. And it's just amazing to see the effect he has on people that have never heard his name or ever heard his story before.
Well, thank you. And we'll hear more from you later. I also believe that Father David Leese, the Vicar General for the Catholic Diocese of Wichita, is with us as well. Father Leese, any opening comments from you? And what do you hope we get into more?
I'm at a little technical disadvantage in running this off of my cell phone because my laptop decided to slow down on some things. So appreciate your patience with me on that. Thank you for the opportunity to join the meeting this evening. Glad to see Ray and Harriet in particular. We were involved with Father Kapaun's homecoming and repatriation. And so good to see them again, and Stan Finger for the article that he wrote, and for those others that are joining us this evening. This has been, a historic event for the Diocese of Wichita, and knowing kind of the paradigms of leadership that KLC presents, we had both technical problems and adaptive challenges. We navigated a lot of our technical problems by hosting such a large event in a Hartman arena, finding the right people to do the right things. Probably the adaptive side of this was, what we'll be talking about tonight is the decision, to right now have Father Capon entombed in our cathedral in downtown Wichita, as opposed to Pilsen, Kansas. And we know that has been a great sacrifice for some of the members of the Pilsen community. I know it was no small decision for the Capon family as well. And I'll be open to sharing more thoughts on that if that's helpful. But also, this wider picture of how can we sort of renew our small Kansas communities. Stan kept referring to Pilsen as a hamlet, and I truly think that is the case. And there was also a balance that was described between wanting to maintain that lovely, peaceful way of life, but then how do you welcome more and more visitors coming? So really an adaptive challenge there for all of us to try to put our heads toward and consider a solution, or maybe a way of acceptance.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing the KLC framework to the conversation. It's exciting to have the relationship with the diocese that we have that just makes that such a natural fit. Also joining us tonight are Harriet Bina, a Pilsen resident who conducts Father Kapaun tours there, and Marion County Commissioner David Mueller. Harriet, David, what's on your mind? What would you like to see us talk about tonight?
Go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. From the county standpoint, obviously our role is safety and support. If we do our job right, no one even knows we're there. We need to get the infrastructure for roads so people can safely come to visit, can hear the story. Safety as far as whether it be EMS or fire support. But really our role is to help and support the community, Pilsen community. Harriet's been the real leader there in any way we can, and work together with Pilsen to provide that support. Harriet?
Well, for us, it's, excuse me, providing decent tours for the people that come there. We want the experience for them to be just to touch their hearts, to learn the story of Father Capon. It's such an amazing story. And we want them to come to Pilsen and hear his story. And we're working hard to provide that. Now, as far as the number of crowd coming, we were told how many thousands would show up for when Father's remains came home, and that did not happen. But those that came there, and I just received a phone call today from a lady that told me how she just happened to arrive about the time they were, the military was removing Father's remains from the hearse to take into the church, and what it meant to her. And for the people to go up and to be able to touch his casket, touch their rosaries against it. And it just, for them, it was just an amazing time, as it was for us. But that's what we want. We want to be able to touch their hearts with his story. And I think the crowds and that would kind of take care of themselves to a certain extent. Right now, we're very busy with tours. Got a lot of people coming, scheduled 2 and 3 tours a week. Not all of them are big ones. Some of them are just getting their families. They're wanting, when they have a family reunion, to bring their family out because they have heard the story of Father and they want their families to hear it. We made a real attempt to draw the Protestant people in to our parish. At that time when Father was home, we didn't have anything scheduled during the day so that the Protestant people would feel comfortable coming. At night, the Catholics had adoration all night long. There was probably never less than 20 people in the church, night and day. They just kept coming. When 2 would leave, 2 more arrived. And so the crowd was spread out over that time, but it was just amazing. And the stories that we heard from that, of how it touched each one of those people. And that has been truly what we want of Father Kapaun's story.
Well, thank you, Harriet. Thank you, David. So I introduced Stan Finger earlier, and I'd like to just, talk with Stan briefly. So this was a story that was your suggestion. Can you kind of tell me, like, what interested you in this story? What made you want to tell this story? What made the journal the right place to try to tell this story? And what are you hoping for to be the outcome of this being a story that people read and discuss?
When I learned that Father Kapaun's remains had been identified in Hawaii and that he would be coming home to Kansas, being a cradle Catholic and knowing how saints are revered in the church, I knew that as his story began to spread, more and more people would want to come to Kansas and Pilsen to learn more about him. And I've been to Pilsen in the past and Marion County for Father Kapaun Day that they hold each June on the first Sunday of June, and how many people come for that. And I kept thinking, if they start having crowds like this on a fairly consistent basis, Pilsen's just not in a position to handle it right now. Marion County's not in a position to handle it right now in terms of bathrooms and restaurants, and they do a wonderful job in the small museum they have there in the rectory next to the church. But I kept thinking, what if they've got 50 or 100 people wanting to come in there on a regular basis? How are they going to handle that? How is Marion County going to handle that if the if his remains are entombed in the cathedral? How is the diocese going to handle that? Because the cathedral is an active parish. Just to me, it raised a lot of questions, knowing how his story is so powerful and touches so many people, regardless of their background. I just knew more and more people would be coming to the area to learn more about him, and I just thought there was a compelling story there about how are we, Wichita, the diocese, South Central Kansas, Marion County, and Pilsen, how are they going to prepare for that? What do they need to do to prepare for that? So that was the genesis of the story. And I hope we could get different perspectives from our panelists about what challenges they see moving forward and how they're hoping to address them. So we can make as Harriet said, make the experience as powerful and memorable for those who come to learn more about Father Kapaun as possible.
Stan, I'm turning it over to you to ask some questions to our panelists.
Sorry, you dropped off, so I wasn't sure where you were. Ray, let's start with you. I was curious what your reaction, you've talked about this in the past, but I'd like you to share it for those in our audience who haven't heard it before. What your reaction was when you got the phone call indicating that your uncle's remains had been identified in Hawaii. That was something no one I ever talked to in connection with the Capon story ever expected would happen. And yet it happened.
Yeah, it really did floor me. I mean, that was not anywhere in my wheelhouse. I don't think it was anybody's wheelhouse. Everybody hoped, and everybody had that, had that hope and prayer that, especially my grandmother, who never gave up hope that he was going to come home. It always had that hope in her. But as time goes on, you just kind of you become numb to the fact that that it's ever going to happen. And when the possible sainthood process started becoming more and more approached, and that possibility, I don't think anybody, really even thought of that opportunity even coming about. So I know when I got the call, like I said, I didn't even pick up the call when it first came through. It came through as it came on the ID, said Fort Knox. I was like, well, I figured it was another telemarketer trying to say, oh, we got some gold to sell you. And so it just had to go to voicemail. And then when my wife came up and said in my office, I said, you need to call this guy because he needs to talk to you about your uncle. And so I called him up, and that's when he said that they had identified his remains. And it literally floored me. I did not know what to say. I mean, it was just, at first I didn't believe him because I just thought, man, this just can't be. This was too much out of the blue. It was, everything that we've known has happened. I mean, it's like the Medal of Honor. We knew that was going to happen. It wasn't an unknown. We knew that some point that was probably going to happen. But this was never never got a phone call saying there's a possibility that this may happen, and it's a possibility that his remains might be here. We kind of heard, back and forth during the Medal of Honor timeframe when they were saying that there might be a possibility that his remains were in the punch bowl, but I don't think it was ever really taken seriously or really considered to think that was true. So when that phone call came in, it literally floored me, and we started seeing the information that he was sending over to verify things. And I don't think I can't imagine. I mean, even if Father Hatzi or the Pope would call and say he's been classified as saint, I don't think I would be as surprised as what I was with that phone call. It literally floored me, to say the least.
Why did the family ultimately choose Wichita as his resting place, at least for now, as opposed to Pilsen or even Arlington National Cemetery? Because he was eligible to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery, but your family chose Wichita.
Yeah, and I've got to say up front, it was not an easy decision whatsoever. I think Harriet can attest to it, and anybody who knows me knows how much Pilsen means to me and how much Pilsen means to our family. It's like Harriet. I cannot say enough great things about her, because it is so great when I'm out there on Father Emil Day or Veterans Day or days I go out there, and just to hear Harriet tell them the story about Father Emil. She doesn't just tell the story, she lives that story, and so do all the people in Pilsen. So we knew how much Father Emil meant to everyone out there. There was no doubt in our mind. And yeah, there was several, some of the POWs thought that Arlington should be where he should go. He should be on Chapel Hill. They felt that more people would see him there. And the more that we had discussions about Arlington's side of things, it was, there was a lot of people who, and including my brother, who he's going to come home to Pilsen and come home to Wichita for a short period of time, and nobody's ever going to be able to see him again. Like my brother said, he goes, I'll never go to Washington, D.C., to Arlington and see his remains. So it just, that kind of took that out of picture fairly early on. But when I started talking, and part of my deciding and our deciding, I really had a tough time thinking of Father's remains being interred in the ground again. It just, for some reason, it just never felt right. It just felt like, for 70 some years, he had been in the punch bowl in Honolulu, and nobody knew. And now he's home, and now he's going to be coming home, and we were going to put him, possibly put him back in the ground again. It just didn't seem right. And it was really funny, because I had a lot of discussions with Deanna Klenda and her brother, who they brought back from Vietnam. And it was funny, because she said the same thing. That was the hardest thing for her, was to have his remains interred back into the ground again. It was just tough. And then when Father Hatzi and Father David, we all started talking about the potential of doing the crypt in the cathedral, and it was a lot of prayers. It was a lot of prayers to Father Emil. It was a lot of prayers to my mom and dad and what they would want, and to my grandparents. And it just felt like the right like the right place for him to be. It just felt, for him to be able to reach out to the hundreds and thousands, and just how he lived his life that way, it just felt like the right place for him to be. And like I said, the toughest day for my wife and I during this whole process, when we brought Father home, was that Monday when we went back out to Pilsen to take Father back to Wichita. And that to this day had to be the saddest day of our lives. I mean, we cried halfway home because we knew how much they loved him out there, and how much they always loved him out there and still love him out there. So it was by no means an easy decision whatsoever. It was probably one of the toughest decisions I've had to make in my life. I know that.
What do you envision as Pilsen's role, or what this will mean for Pilsen moving forward as the story of Father Kapaun continues to grow, as others have said?
I mean,
Pilsen's place in all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think their place is huge in all this. I think, even though it's kind of funny, because my wife and I were fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with Mike Dow and Paul Roach during the whole ceremony when we brought Father back. And when we were in the mortuary and had the moment with Father, and the POWs were in there with us and gave them their moment. And we were there for quite a while. And when Mike stood up and said, "Father, I'm saying goodbye to your bones, but I'm not going to say goodbye to you." And that's how he saw that. And I truly believe, Father's in Pilsen. Father's everywhere, but his heart and soul is in Pilsen. The funeral that went on, and I see Pilsen as being the place that people still want to have that connection. I mean, they're going to have the connection with Father's remains in the cathedral, but they want to know, they want to be able to touch where he was at. They want to be able to feel where he was at. They want to hear the stories that they're only going to be able to hear out in Pilsen, and only going to be able to see and touch the things out in Pilsen. So I think their role is huge in his growing and what his name is to the world.
Thank you for that. Father Lees, what do you, during the funeral, Bishop Kemi invited the world to come to Wichita to learn more about Father Kapaun and come see where he rests now. And I thought that invitation is going to open the door to a lot of people. What do you anticipate in terms of response? Are you anticipating pretty significant crowds to come to Wichita to learn more about Father Kapaun?
I would say, honestly, it's really hard to say at this point. We just don't have any metrics to use to calculate that. We are making preparations right now to receive visitors at the cathedral. Scott Carter, who works for the diocese and in the office of Father Kapaun's cause, is now working very closely with the cathedral staff to train volunteers as docents and guides to receive visitors, whether they be grade school classes, bus loads of visitors coming from one location from elsewhere, or just people who may come to the noon cathedral mass and want to stay and learn a little bit more about Father Kapaun, as they were able to pray the mass with his tomb and remains being right there. So we're just going to respond as best we can to what we begin to see. We may be able to learn from our neighbors to the south of us in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. They now have Blessed Stanley Rother, Father Stanley Rother, who was a martyr that died in Central America. And his remains similarly were moved from his small hometown of Okarche, Oklahoma, to Oklahoma City. And there's a large shrine and visitor center and museum being constructed right now in Oklahoma City to house the mortal remains of Father Rother, and to be a place where pilgrims can come and pray as well. So we're open to possibilities on how, if Father Capon's cause moves forward and he becomes beatified, is our hope for the next big step, that we'll be able to determine, how we should respond. The tomb is not considered to be permanent in the cathedral. We've placed it there for the time being, but we also are prepared to relocate his tomb to an appropriate place where pilgrims can come and encounter him in prayer, learn more about his life, and the like.
What challenges does the diocese face in maintaining an active parish? The cathedral is an active parish, and you've touched on it in that some pilgrims may want to come to like the noon daily mass and then stay and pray and learn more. How do you juggle maintaining an active parish like that with the arrival of pilgrims who are going to want to be taking tours, and you can't just treat it like a museum. You've got the life of a parish to factor in as well.
Yeah. And on that part, we owe gratitude to Father Adam Kiter, who's the rector of the cathedral, and his staff, who is willing to, accept, if you will, that big change to their schedule and the staffing requirements required to offer hospitality. They've identified and blocked off hours of weekdays and weekends specifically open for visitors to come. Again, as I mentioned, Scott Carter is actively working to train and educate a staff of volunteers to receive those visitors. We've even taken security into consideration, both for Father's tomb itself, but being in downtown Wichita, there's a large homeless population. There are many, kind of itinerant individuals that roam around the cathedral, and historically, that's always been a challenge for the cathedral to show respect for these brothers and sisters in Christ, but also to care for those that are struggling with drug addictions, mental disorders, just the ravages that poverty can inflict upon a person. For decades, the cathedral has had to find that balance between preserving the cathedral as a place of prayer and its facilities for the appropriate reasons, and yet also, again, responding in charity to these dwellers downtown. So we've added on-site security to try to enhance that protection really for everybody.
What role does the diocese see Pilsen playing moving forward? I've heard talk perhaps of maybe working in conjunction somewhat, in that there will be some artifacts downtown at the cathedral in connection with Father Kapaun, but an acknowledgement that most of the artifacts and a lot of the information about him will still be up in Pilsen. Do you see Pilsen still playing a significant role?
I think anybody's home should always play a significant role in their life. And again, the Pilsen is just a beautiful site in Kansas. It's quintessential Kansas. To drive out to Pilsen, I think many visitors coming from other parts of the country will get a real feel for Kansas in just making that 70-minute drive from Wichita to Pilsen. They'll see a beautiful church. The St. John Nepomucene Church is one of the gems of the diocese, and I think a real testament to the richness of our Catholic faith. They'll get to experience the great hospitality, that Midwestern hospitality of the people of Pilsen, like Harriet and her, army of volunteers who so graciously welcome people. You can never separate a person from home. And so I think we will always want to have that strong connection with Father Capon's home, where his parents are buried, where his family roots were, where he served for a time as a priest, both as an assistant and as a pastor. We'll never want to blot that out ever. And there are many saints in the church who are revered in different locations where they grew up, where they ministered and served, where they died. And sometimes those are in other complete foreign countries, but they're so highly revered that it's not unusual to see a variety of locations dedicated to the honor and the memory of that beloved saint.
It'll be interesting to see how that blossoms as we move forward. Thank
Yes.
you for that. Harriet, what would you say the mood is in Pilsen right now? I mean, we've kind of had that high of the funeral and the observances, and now the dust is kind of starting to settle a little bit, and people are starting to adapt to the fact that, you know, Father's really here now. And what's next? What would you say the mood is in Pilsen? Are you seeing an increase in the number of people coming to visit, or a change in who's coming to learn more about him?
A lot of the tours that we're having are repeat tours. The schools and that have been there before, they come every year bringing their kids. Today we had 120 of the Mount Carmel boys there, and the girls will be with us on Thursday. So some of these schools are repeats and they continue to come, but we're getting a lot of calls from individuals that saw on television the funeral, followed it. I have a man that calls me regularly now from Texas, who is a convert to the faith and heard about Father Kapaun's story. And so he calls me wanting to know more all the time. It takes a half hour just to talk to him. I have a man from New York that calls. He's wanting to know. He's actually in a home up there and he calls. I have a man from Minnesota that calls me regularly. It's great to talk to them. It takes a half hour almost at every call. They want to know so much about Father. They want me to tell them the stories of Father. But in Pilsen, we are seeing a lot of more people coming. We're getting a lot of the Protestant people to start to come. I think they find out, you know, we try to tell them when we know a Protestant group is coming, the first thing we tell them is we're not here to compare our faiths. We're here simply to tell you a little about the Catholic Church, so you'll understand why Father Kapaun did what he did on the battlefield and in the prison camps. And so we explain some of the things, the Stations of the Cross, our statues and that when they first come. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes. Most of them are very thankful because we all know they've heard stories that aren't true about the Catholic faith. And so that gives us an opportunity to share that. But a lot of them are coming because that they've heard what Father Kapaun did in that prison camp, how he took care of men of all faiths. A lot of them are praying to Father Kapaun for his intercession. A lot of them didn't even know his story. They only know he's working miracles. And so they will call me and ask to come out to learn his story because they have asked him to intercede for them. And so that's been really, in the last couple of years, it's picked up a lot. We get a lot of the military men that will come there. A lot of them are Protestant, but because of Father's story, it's just touched their hearts so much that they want to come and be a part of that. A lot of them enjoy coming into the rural area because it's so quiet. I've had couples come and in the museum, we have a petition box that we tell them to put their prayer requests in that petition box. And sometimes the people will try to tell me what the problem is they're going through. And as they do, they get choked up. They can't tell me. And I tell them, you don't have to tell me. Just put your prayer in that petition box, because in Pilsen, we pray at every Mass for everyone seeking Father Kapaun's intercession, whether it's spiritual or physical needs. That is something that we have tried very hard to express to our fellow priests of the diocese, to tell them that if we're getting results from those prayers from Pilsen, think what we could do if every priest in the diocese would pray that prayer for Father Kapaun's intercession. And so that's one of the things we're pushing hard to do, to remind the priests when they come out. But for the people that are coming there, just the whole visit to Pilsen seems to touch their lives. First of all, they enjoy how quiet it is. They say they could go into the church and meditate and spend time there. And we always tell them about Mr. and Mrs. Capon being buried in the cemetery. Father Tawny, who wrote the first book, is buried in the cemetery. Father Sklenar, who gave him all the sacraments of the church except his ordination, is buried there. Father Richard Stufley, the first boy from Pilsen to enter Chaplain Capon Memorial High School his freshman year, he too wanted to be a priest and could not afford to go to that school. And that was one of the things the Pilsen people were a little upset about when they built the school, was the tuition was so high, Father Capon couldn't afford to go to his own school. And of course, since then that has changed. But you know, people come there, they're seeking that connection to Father Capon. It's quiet in Pilsen. They come. I had one couple come and I gave them the tour in the morning. And I had another tour later on, and I looked and there was a car out in the parking lot, Florida tags. And I've got to admit, I was tired. I was ready to go home, but I went back into the church to see if I had another tour. And it was the same couple that had been there that morning. They had been in tears the whole time I gave them the tour. They were still in tears. And when I went back in to talk to them, they told me that they were Protestant, but they had come to Pilsen because they had heard that story and they had some problems evidently in their own life and they wanted to talk them over with Father. And they told me they were just having so much trouble tearing themselves away from Pilsen because they enjoyed the quietness. They enjoyed the time of being able to be with Father, to meditate with him. So we're seeing more people coming, but we're also seeing a lot of the individual people that continue to come, and having the Protestant people join us. That's been a real exciting thing for us because it shows Father took care of all men in that prison camps, men of all faiths. He's still doing it.
It's inspiring to hear. Thank you. David, when you listen to Harriet talk about how peaceful it is there in Pilsen, I know various officials have talked about as the crowds start to grow moving forward, how do we protect Pilsen from being swallowed up by development? How do you protect Pilsen and keep it as it is? What kind of challenges are you facing in Marion County to prepare for these crowds in the many ways that you'll be dealing with?
Well, excuse me. First of all, just the story. I'm going to turn on a light. I don't want to blind everybody. There we go. The sun was coming in the window, and now we have light. But the story of Father, and especially the experience in Pilsen, is just so meaningful and so powerful. Our role as the county is to support. Get people in and out safely as possible. I'd guess the biggest challenge for us is the infrastructure of roads. As you noticed, previous to Father's homecoming, the roads were in very, very bad condition. We did try to make that much more presentable for his actual homecoming, and seeing that road with the procession and the flags was just a very, very powerful message. So we have addressed that road in the short term. We are also working on access from the other direction. And I will say Representative John Barker has been very helpful, helping us to navigate through some of the state bureaucracy, trying to improve transportation coming in and out. But back to your point, we need to preserve the character of Pilsen. I feel very strongly about that. Harriet's talked about that. Everybody has referred to that, actually walking in his footsteps. It's very important to maintain that character, that tranquility, to allow people to reflect on the story. Your interview with the shrine in Wisconsin, I felt was very helpful. We ease into that expansion, and we regulate so that people can have a meaningful experience. And so that is our hope as the county, is to partner with Pilsen, with their leadership, not be intrusive, but be supportive and provide them the tools to get this message out to as many people as possible.
What does Marion County need to do to prepare for the people that will come? Because, you know, they'll need a place to eat, perhaps, maybe a place to sleep. How much does Marion County need to do to get ready for that?
Well, as a farmer and Christian, we have a lot of faith. One of my favorite sayings is live by faith, not by sight. Unfortunately, in government, everything is by sight and by, we're not so much on faith, but our hope is as as things progress, we can bring some food outlets into Marion, which is about a 10-mile distance from Pilsen. We really don't see Pilsen as the overnight spot.
Right.
We really see a regional connection here between Wichita, Abilene, and Pilsen. Many visitors that come to Wichita will also want to visit Eisenhower Center, but really the key to get the story is in Pilsen. To hear Harriet and the other people in Pilsen tell that story is really the powerful message that people take home. So whatever we can do to support, yes, we don't want McDonald's in Pilsen. Sorry, Harriet. But I'm sure there will be some things that the church and the local people can do in Pilsen to respectfully, give some of the flavor of the community. But as far as those wanting fast food and that type of thing, our hope would be Marion with that 10-mile distance. And we've also talked about the possibility of shuttles. But those are things we have to grow into. But we're looking at all the options. We're doing whatever we can to work together. But again, we have to do it with respect to the Pilsen community.
What would you say your biggest challenge is in protecting Pilsen, helping Pilsen retain the personality, the atmosphere that it has now, so that people can really get a sense of walking in Father Kapaun's footsteps?
Well, I think the Pilsen community is doing a very fine job of that. I'd say our challenge, our role is to support Pilsen. Marion County has always been known for our poor roads, so let's admit that right up front. But we are making progress, and that progress is being accomplished with partnerships. We're partnering with the state. We're partnering with other entities to try to improve our infrastructure. This is, again, bringing people in to hear this story is going to be a powerful and valuable experience for people to come in and see. Our challenge is to get people in and out safely. But by utilizing partnerships, I think we can make that happen.
This question is for all of the panelists. I'm curious to hear your perspectives on how much having Father Kapaun back in Kansas, his remains back in Kansas, has galvanized or transformed the telling of his story, how it's changed the trajectory of things.
I think for me, I mean, it's, tangible isn't a word that would best fit this, but it's like everyone has something to hold on to now. I mean, I think for me, just in my part, in my family, just to have this to happen, I think I've told a lot of people, the word never has kind of disappeared from my vocabulary. It just, it truly is a miracle. I mean, that's the only way I look at what happened and how his remains were so intact, and how everyone came together, and it just expounds what he is and what he stood for and how he lived his life. It's just, it really is showing his life to the world at this point. I mean, it really has become, it's not, the state knows about Father, the United States the world knows about Father, and that's only continued to grow and expound way beyond where it's at right now.
Stan, I would say from the perspective of the priests of the Diocese of Wichita, we have a brother who's come home. One of the priests, as he was observing Father Capon's coffin being brought into the cathedral right before its entombment, turned and said to another, "Now we're all present and accounted for. We're all together." And for me, just having the privilege to work with Ray and the Capon family and to learn more about Father's life, I think of him differently. As I mentioned in my homily at the vigil, had he survived, I very likely would have known him as an older, venerable priest with lots of great stories to hear. And younger priests love to hear the war stories of the older priests. And that would have been great. And that just, if you will, made him more incarnate for me, and has only fostered my love for him and the inspiration I receive from him to be a priest who's willing to lay down his life in however God will ordain. So for the priest of the diocese, he is really present with us. I would say, tangibly speaking, as you said, Ray, that idea of his real presence here, I'm hoping and even convinced there will be miracles coming from people praying at his tomb, coming to be with him. And, we'll need a few more miracles in the future to keep advancing his cause. And so I think just that fact will really lend itself to continuing to have his story shared and transmitted. Our Office of Communications is keeping track of all of the stories, and this is worldwide. It was a couple of days later that we were even getting inquiries from the Daily Mail in London about details and photos that they could share. There's probably close to 100 articles and stories that we just captured online and in other resources. So this has really bolstered his story on a wider level to a wider audience that we hadn't been able to reach before. And I think that'll have a great impact on his cause.
Well, I can't speak on that level, but I can tell you that I've been waiting for almost 70 years for Father to come home. And he finally got home for a couple of days. And for the Pilsen people, that was amazing. They had grown up knowing his parents. They knew Bessie, who's there in Pilsen a lot. A lot of them still are talking about the stories they shared with her. We know that Bessie had talked to relatives. Jerry Moklevets told us as a young child, he was there with his family, visiting with the Capon family. And she made the remark she waited for the day that her son would come home. So for us, he was home in Pilsen when he was there. Even though it was a couple of days, it was our time with Father. And everybody really looked forward to that time with him. Waited for a long time for him to come home. And then he was taken from us again. And I know he didn't go far. And I know that people can go to Wichita to visit him. But his mother prayed for him to come home. And so for us, that still isn't home. Now, we had a lot of people that came into the church that prayed on his casket. We had one lady that said she had left the church for some time. And then she told her family she wanted to come back because this was more than just a priest coming home. This was also history. And she wanted to come home and see what was going on. So she came to Pilsen that day, and in church, she was able to go up and put her hands on the casket. And when she left, she went back and told her dad, "It's time." He said, "What do you mean it's time?" She says, "It's time I come back to the church now." So Father Capon is still reaching out to people, and I know he'll continue to do that in Wichita, but for the Pilsen people, he could have done that there too.
David, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, there's just so many stories, so many miracles. Even the day of the homecoming, we'd prepared. Pilsen had prepared for months for that one special day, worried about crowds, worried about rain. It was picture perfect. The crowds were evenly spaced. The weather was absolutely perfect. Father shined on his hometown once again.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for those reflections, and thank you, Stan, for leading that discussion. I do want to open it up for questions, for comments from the audience. And I want to go back a few minutes ago. Mike Burris asked a question that I think was for Father Lease about what role will Capon Mount Carmel Catholic High School play in hosting many of Father Kapaun's artifacts as it has in the past, and will it be included in tours and pilgrimages?
I would just go back to what I said earlier about many places in an area can honor a saint's life. And this school that bears his name, I think, will also have its place in telling his story, in sharing that with visitors. I can't speak specifically to what the administration's thoughts are at this time. I do know they did open up the entry rotunda of the high school during the days that we were celebrating Father Kapaun's liturgies, particularly the Tuesday afternoon that we had a luncheon for 300 guests. We had students from Capon Mount Carmel who were hosting our visitors at the luncheon at our Cathedral Hall. And then after the lunch was over, anybody was invited to head to the high school to see those artifacts. So that itself was just I think a very thoughtful outreach from the high school community to our visitors. So it will be things like that I see continuing as well into the future.
There's also, thank you for that, Father Lease. And there's also a comment from Jolene Dowling in the chat. David Mueller touched on partnerships. Has there been consideration of forming a Father Kapaun coalition, bringing voices from all community stakeholders, Pilsen, Wichita, Marion, Abilene, together with intention for planning, structure, etc., to coordinate all related aspects of his homecoming, so all feel a part of the process? An example would be to engage the expertise of the history from Harriet and others to train those who will be sharing Father Kapaun's story with tours in Wichita. So there's a lot there in that comment, but I guess there's a question there about coordination, and I don't know if any of our panelists would like to speak to that comment.
Well, this is David. I'd say Harriet and I and several Marion County people work together, economic development, roads, over the last maybe 8 months or so, trying to put some plans together, try to at least communicate internally. I would agree, we need to expand that, do what we can, again, to support and plan whatever we can do together.
I think, a lot of us are still just sort of taking a welcome break from, it's almost been a month now, and that time has rolled by. I just want to say I personally and the bishop and others on our planning team have received beautiful notes and cards of thanks, testaments to graces received by persons that participated, pride in that we as a Catholic community showed our best self to the world in how we honored this Catholic priest, this Army chaplain, this son of Kansas. I said, in a very tumultuous time, for 3 days, we had a beautiful distraction from all of that other stuff. And it was just a beautiful break from all of the tumult around us. And but moving ahead, I think this is a good reminder to consider, those different places that Father impacted in his life, kind of identifying what are our competencies. What we all have a skill, if you will, in this, and we have to recognize those skills and the contributions that they make to the overall effort. And moving forward, it will behoove us to bring those voices, the usual and unusual voices, to the conversation, to make sure that we're, if you will, in a good way, making the most of this for all of the communities involved, for the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Wichita, for the Kansas community, for Pilsen, for, there'll still be ongoing connections with the military, and so many far-reaching. I was so touched on the response of the Korean community. We had notes of thanks. We had some delegates from the Korean consulate who came to the funeral. Ray was honored to be a recipient on behalf of Father Emil for their highest military honor in South Korea. So this has far-reaching impacts that we really all do need to remember and invite to the conversation when that next big step presents itself.
And I think for me, one of the things that I had said when everything was kind of done and was just kind of looking back and reviewing, like Father David said, we had 3 amazing days, 3 days where everyone came together for one purpose, for one reason, for one person. And I think that's what we need to make sure we all continue to remember and all continue to push forward for, is to always remember what that meaning was and how everyone felt at that moment, and what the strength of what Father is and what Father did, to always remember that, and what's going to guide us in the future in the direction we're going to go, because that moment was for Father. Father came home. It's like Harriet said, Father came home. But people have been waiting a lot of years, and we just can't forget what that meaning is and what that meaning is going to stand for, and to be together as one, to do that, and to stay as a one and focus on that.
So we're getting close to time, and I wanted to give each of our panelists a chance to offer final comments. And as we've talked and I've listed, I have a couple of things on my mind. Like one, I sort of hear like some challenges here in terms of the unknown, like that we don't know what Father Kapaun's path will be in terms of canonization. We don't know how many people will come to the cathedral or come to Pilsen. And you heard in Harriet's comments that sometimes, especially you expect people to come and they don't. And yet there's a challenge if you don't prepare for them to come and they do come, you have to be ready for that. And then I hear lots of challenges with like people wanting to have their community's connection to Father Kapaun honored. So I'm thinking about those challenges, and I'm wondering, panelists, in your closing comments, kind of what's on your mind, what challenges do you see on the horizon, and what would be your hopes or aspirations, like for the decades to come, that that this works out the way that you'd hope or dream it would? Like, what would that look like? Or any just final comments other than that, give you some options. But yeah, I'm wondering about challenges, what you'd hope to see happen, and just final thoughts.
Well, when you talk about the trip to Pilsen, just so people know, when they first come there for a tour, we tell them the story of Father Capon, which takes an hour. And yes, we don't have room, except we have to do it in the church. It's the biggest building we have. When they talk about bringing in their food trucks and that, yes, in time we probably have to do something like that. Right now, our Altar Society feeds these people. If they want to come, they get a meal for $8. They can't go anywhere else for that, and they feed them so that the tour can continue. We tell them the church history for a half hour, and they go over and they hear they take the tour of the museum, which everything we have in our museum was given to us by Helen and Eugene Capon. And so they come over and they tour the museum. And then we go ahead and tell them the alleged miracles. So for us, it's just giving us time to give the tour. But the people that come, they give us, it takes about 3 hours. And they all say in Pilsen, when you have 48 people, it takes 3 hours. But to tell Father's story, and to have it touch their hearts the way we plan to have it work, it's going to take at least 3 hours. So our challenge is simply to have someone step up when someone else falls down or has to leave the group for whatever reason, that we have plenty of people just stepping up and continuing telling that story of Father Kapaun.
I would put it in another context. We've all got to come together and certainly collaborate and put our minds together on this, but as Christians, as Catholic Christians, we also know that God has a plan for all of this. Father Kapaun followed Jesus Christ. He gave his life in the same way that Jesus Christ gave his life for the good of others, that others might live physically and spiritually. And we're all called to be disciples. In our diocese today, we're making a concerted effort to invite every Catholic Christian to be a missionary disciple. And Father Kapaun presents an outstanding example of what a missionary disciple looks like, not only as a priest, but one who went to a faraway country, engaged a different culture, reached out to people of different faiths and no faith and background. And God, the Father, guided his steps. The Holy Spirit inspired his mind to be able to preach the word and to refute the errors of their captors. And it was Jesus Christ who was that teacher for Father Kapaun, who Father Kapaun followed to the very last breath that he gave. And so in all of this, I firmly believe that we continue to keep ourselves open to what the Lord's plan is for this. We entrust ourselves to that, and we work as if it all depends on us, but we pray as if it all depends on the Lord. And I think Father Kapaun is going to be instrumental in helping us all know the directions that we need to take in the future.
And I would agree with what Father David just said. There's no such things as coincidence. I firmly believe that there is no such thing as coincidence. Father's remains being identified at this moment and in this time of what is going on with the world and what is happening with the world. That just didn't happen out of the blue. I mean, it may have seemed like it did, but it didn't. I mean, the timing was right. It pulled everyone together. And I still believe, like Father said, that we're going to be directed of what needs to happen next and what this direction is going to go. I mean, that's how Father was led. I mean, Father didn't stand back and say, "What's in it for me if I go help this guy? What's in it for me?" He never thought that. He did what had to be done and knew what had to be done, and knew how God was directing him and what direction he needed to go. And I think that's, I know as far as my life goes and how things are, that's the direction. That's right. That's who we need to listen to, is to Father and to God and to our faith, and to know what direction we need to do. And I think if we follow that we will be going down the right path. I think we'll be going down a path that Father would want us to go down. I do believe that.
A powerful message. And a message of faith from our side as the county. We just need to do whatever we can to support and encourage and provide safe transport in and out. And we will do everything we can to support that. And I believe a lot of that is faith. We plan as much as we can, but in the end, it's going to be what it's going to be. And those plans are already known, just not to us. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the powerful message gets to as many people as possible, and make that visit to Pilsen, and coordinating with Wichita and coordinating with other partners to make that happen.
Well, thank you, panelists. Thank you for your time and your comments, and for being here with us on a Tuesday evening to talk about Father Kapaun and his story and legacy and the events of the last month and beyond. Grateful to you and to all of those who joined us for the discussion. This was a very different event from many of the ones that we've had talking about politics and leadership challenges, and it was very refreshing and energizing to be here tonight with you all for this conversation. And thank you to Stan Finger for your story, for bringing this to us. Do you have any maybe concluding thoughts on your part? So what's next? What stories would you like to do in the future related to this topic? What's the next big thing on your agenda?
I'm going to be paying attention to how many people start coming and what they're drawn to, whether it's the crypt or Pilsen or both. I'm interested to see if we will be seeing stories of additional miracles blossoming as we move forward, because everyone I talk to says this isn't the end of Father Kapaun's story. In many ways, it's just the beginning. We've reached a new chapter, and I'm going to be very curious to see what happens next, because I think a lot could happen, and maybe even sooner than people think. So we'll see. I'm intrigued.
Well, we'll look forward to your continued interest and coverage of what happens next. And thank you so much. And everyone, have a good evening. And we'll see you at one of our next events. Thanks so much.